කෝඩියෙන් භාගයයි කලක් පවතින අලුත් පෙනුමයි.
Tonight, the fifth option. Sri Lanka's rollout receives a big boost of 1.5 million Moderna vaccines from the United States.
We're very happy to be part of Sri Lanka's COVID success story.
We will send this stock of Moderna vaccines to Kandy district to complete the vaccination process there.
Hidden dangers. Health expert warns parents against compromising the safety of their children by slacking on COVID-19 safety measures.
Parents and family members have to take their responsibility to protect their children. Even though they vaccinated, they can act as carriers.
Planning ahead. More restrictions ease today as tourism authorities plan special promotions to attract vaccinated tourists.
At the moment, discussing a promotional scheme with the airlines and the hoteliers. They are giving a proposal for the promotion scheme.
Positive expectations. The central bank reports that manufacturing activities in June improved by 8.3 points in the Purchasing Managers Index. All this and much more coming up on this Friday, the 16th of July 2021.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයිෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වලකයි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. Government's ambitious target of vaccinating 14 million people over the age of 18 by the end of this year received a further boost with the arrival of a stock of 1.5 million Moderna vaccines this morning. Donated by the United States through the WHO's COVAX facility, this is the first batch of Moderna vaccine to arrive in the island and will be used to carry out vaccinations in the Kandy district. In more good news, the island's COVID-19 vaccine coverage will be further expanded as the country will receive a batch of 5.2 million more doses of 3 vaccine varieties before the end of this month. In the meantime, the National Medicines Regulatory Authority gave the green light for Chinese-manufactured SINOVAC vaccine for emergency use in Sri Lanka as well. Donated by the United States through the World Health Organization's COVAX facility, a consignment of 1.5 million Moderna vaccines arrived in the country at 9 a.m. today on board a Qatar Airways charter flight. The first batch of the Moderna vaccine was received by Minister of Health Pavitra Vanyarachi, State Minister of Production, Supply and Regulation of Pharmaceuticals Professor Channa Jayasumana and US Ambassador to Sri Lanka Alena B. Teplitz. Moderna is the fifth addition to Sri Lanka's vaccine mix currently used in the island's immunization drive against the novel coronavirus. Speaking to media, US Ambassador to Sri Lanka Alena B. Teplitz expressed delight to be part of Sri Lanka's COVID success story.
1.5 million doses of Moderna vaccine straight from the United States and our national stockpile from the American people to share with the people of Sri Lanka. Really grateful for the support of the government here. We're very happy to be part of Sri Lanka's COVID success story.
Welcoming the vaccine stock, State Minister of Production, Supply and Regulation of Pharmaceuticals Professor Channa Jayasumana revealed that the Moderna vaccines will be used to vaccinate people in the Kandy district.
On behalf of the government of Sri Lanka and people of Sri Lanka, I would like to thank the United States to send us this donation of 1.5 million doses of Moderna. It's mRNA-based vaccines, almost like Pfizer, and it shows very high efficacy, almost 93% efficacy, and it's widely used in the United States. So we will send this stock of Moderna vaccines to Kandy district to complete the vaccination process there.
Meanwhile, the country's vaccination drive is forging ahead with health sector officials as well as military personnel manning the island-wide vaccination centres. During the course of yesterday, a remarkable 315,121 people were vaccinated against COVID-19. According to the epidemiology unit, to date, 5,175,605 people have received their first dose, which amounts to about 37% of the country's adult population. Further, 1,628,876 people have received both doses, which translates to about 12% of the adult population. Meanwhile, with the addition of 1.5 million doses of the Moderna vaccine to the country's stockpile, the island has so far received 10,098,100 doses of 5 vaccine varieties. Of these doses, 6,804,481 members of the general public have been administered with the vaccine, with a remaining stock of 3,293,619 vaccines yet to be used. What's more, the country's inoculation drive will be further strengthened by the arrival of a consignment of 5.2 million doses before the end of this month. The consignment will comprise of 3.6 million Sinopharm vaccines, 1.4 million AstraZeneca and 150,000 Pfizer vaccines. This will provide a much-needed boost to the government's ambitious target of immunizing 14 million people over the age of 18 in Sri Lanka by the end of this year. In addition, the National Medicines Regulatory Authority granted the Chinese-manufactured SINOVAC vaccine permission for emergency use in Sri Lanka. Accordingly, all of the COVID-19 vaccines approved by the World Health Organization have received emergency approval for use in Sri Lanka.
අද සේවසකට වැඩි ජනතා විශ්වාසය නව සංයෝගයකින් රයිනෝ රෝෆිං සහ සීලිං ෂීට්.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today instructed officials to immediately launch mobile vaccination services for those who are unable to leave their homes due to illness. The instructions were issued during a discussion with the Special Committee on COVID-19 Control at the Presidential Secretariat today.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa held a meeting with members of the Special Committee on COVID-19 Control this morning, where the progress of the national efforts were reviewed. At the meeting, the President was informed by the task force that a high percentage of COVID-19 infections and deaths were of members of public who had not received any vaccinations. Accordingly, the President instructed officials to immediately launch mobile vaccination services for members of the public who are unable to leave their homes due to illness. The President also instructed the task force to look at prioritizing the improving of ease to access to vaccinations in order to increase the number of daily vaccinations and reach the government's target.
Big 3.
World Health Organization Director General Dr. Tedros Adhanom has urged people not to assume that the global pandemic is coming to an end just yet, as cases and deaths due to the Delta variant are on the rise across the world and hospital capacities are once again being challenged by increasing patient numbers. He added that in order to deal with the situation, the world must look at scaling up vaccine supply and sharing with the countries that are most in need of them.
The Delta variant is ripping around the world at a scorching pace, driving a new spike in cases and death. After 10 weeks of declines, deaths are increasing again. We continue to hear reports from all regions of the world about hospitals reaching capacity. For health workers that have been in a titanic battle for more than a year and have record waiting lists to attend to, increased hospitalizations at any level is a challenge to them and their patients and to the overall capacity of the health system. It is definitely worse in places that have very few vaccines, but the pandemic is not over anywhere. We are experiencing a worsening public health emergency that further threatens lives, livelihoods, and a sound global economic recovery. The world is watching in real time as the COVID-19 virus continues to change and become more transmissible. This is no time for a lull. We want to see progress being built on and a surge of action to scale up the supply and sharing of life-saving health tools.
Health authorities today revised the country's overall number of Delta variant cases confirmed in the country so far to 36 from the previously mentioned 38 due to a duplication error. Meanwhile, the director of the Lady Ridgeway Hospital for Children urged the parents and guardians to take the safety of their children more seriously as a more severe post-COVID infection known as multisystem inflammatory syndrome has been discovered in children.
Yesterday's reported 38 cases of Delta variant infections has been revised to 36 today due to an alleged duplication error. As such, offering clarity on the matter, Director of the Health Promotion Bureau Dr. Ranjit Batuwantudava explained how the confusion occurred.
කලින්ම වාර්තා වුණු රෝගීන් 5ක් හිටියට පස්සේ තව රෝගීන් 14ක් වාර්තා වුණා. පස්සේ ඒ 14යි 5යි 19යි. නමුත් ඒ දෙවනුව වාර්තා වූ 14 දිනාගෙන් දෙදෙනෙක් කලින් පහෙත් හිටියා. ඒ නිසා ඒ දෙකක් රිපීට් වුණා. එතකොට එතන 17යි. ඊට අමතරව කොළඹ සරසවියෙන් තව එක් රෝගියෙක් වාර්තා වුණා. එකයි එතකොට 18යි. ඒ කලින් වාර්තා වෙච්ච 18යි ඊයේ වාර්තා වුණ 18යි එකතුව 36යි.
Meanwhile, Director of the Lady Ridgeway Hospital for Children, Dr. G. Vijay Surya, urged parents and family members to act responsibly when moving about in society, as nearly 490 children at the hospital have tested positive for the virus during the second and third waves.
In LRH second wave and third wave, there are around nearly 490 cases are reported in this hospital. In addition to that, nearly over 300 bystanders are reported with the corona infection. There are over 10 children who have died in this hospital due to the corona infection. All these 490 children were infected through their parents and other family members. Parents and family members have to take their responsibility to protect their children. Even though they vaccinated, they can act as carriers.
Dr. Vijay Surya further stated that even though children do not develop severe COVID-19 induced complications, COVID-infected children could develop a serious condition known as multisystem inflammatory syndrome, which could prove to be fatal if not treated immediately.
Among the corona children, we have noticed that there are other diseases called MITC, the multi-organ inflammatory disease syndrome. There are few patients reported in this hospital. Actually, parent has to pay their attention regarding this. Sometimes your child having some kind of mild fever as well as cough and running nose. Sometimes parents are not thinking about the corona. Sometimes that may be a corona. Following 2 weeks time, if that children having some other illness, that means skin rash or red eye and abdominal pain, vomiting and things, the parents has to bring their children to the hospital and take the medical advice soon. The delay get more complication and sometimes very difficult to save the life of the children.
In the meantime, 1,484 new COVID-19 patients were reported yesterday. The district to report the highest infections was Colombo with 318 cases. A further 37 foreign arrivals undergoing treatment at hospitals were also part of yesterday's tally. As for today, this blank new number of COVID infections have been confirmed so far. Meanwhile, the recovery of 918 COVID-19 patients today raised the country's overall number of recoveries to 254,871.
More news on the other side of this break. Stay tuned.
ගෙදරකට තේ හදනවා කියන්නේ වෙනම වැඩ. එක එක්කිනාගේ පදම වෙනස්. මැලිබන් තේ ගෙදර පදමට තේ.
Welcome back. In more news, a host of guidelines stretching across 10 sectors have been relaxed by the Director General of Health Services today, while the Day 7 PCR test requirement for vaccinated tourists has also been waived. Meanwhile, Minister of Tourism Prasanna Ranatunga revealed that a tourism promotion scheme is being formulated in the days to come to revive the country's tourism sector, targeting vaccinated tourists.
Director General of Health Services Dr. Asala Gunawardana further relaxed the COVID restrictions in place over 10 other categories today. According to the revised guidelines, zoological gardens have been given permission to open at 25% of its visitor capacity. In addition, wildlife and children's parks, adventure sites, camping sites and betting centres were given permission to reopen and operate under the prescribed health and safety guidelines. Owners of rest houses and boarding houses can also resume daily operations in line with the health and safety guidelines. The revised guidelines also permit indoor musical shows to take place at 50% of the premises capacity, but however prohibited outdoor carnivals and musical shows. Dr. Gunawardana also stated that tournaments and group activities exclusive of physical interaction could take place without spectators. In the meantime, quarantine guidelines for travellers arriving in the country were also revised today. As such, via the new guidelines, vaccinated travellers who have not arrived from a travel-restricted country under special permission and release from quarantine with a negative on-arrival PCR test don't have to undergo a PCR test 7 days after arrival. However, unvaccinated children aged between 2 to 18 years accompanying fully vaccinated parents should undergo a COVID-19 PCR test on the 7th day of arrival from a Ministry of Health approved private or state sector lab. The travel guidelines also amended the list of countries where travellers have been restricted from entering the country. As such, tourists with a travel history in the past 14 days include transit to India, South American countries and South African countries have been banned from entering. Vietnam, which was also previously part of the list, has been removed. However, the guidelines listed out special categories of travellers allowed to disembark in the country if arriving from or transited to travel-restricted countries with the permission of the Director General of Health Services. Accordingly, Sri Lankan and dual citizens along with their foreign national spouses and valid resident visa holders can enter Sri Lanka. Further, foreign national staff members of the diplomatic missions or UN organizations or UN specialized agencies or international organizations with permanent officers in Sri Lanka holding diplomatic passports and their accompanying persons can enter the country. The guidelines also permit the entry of foreign nationals arriving for important projects, meetings or discussions as invited by the Sri Lankan government or private organizations. Meanwhile, with the easing of the tourist guidelines, Minister of Tourism Prasanna Ranatunga revealed that steps have been taken to create tour packages targeting vaccinated tourists.
In Sri Lanka, the President and the government commitment is to vaccinate at least 60% of the population in the Sri Lankan community. Once it's done, Sri Lanka will be a safe country to travel. So we are going to introduce a promotion scheme for the tourists who are fully vaccinated. We are at the moment discussing a promotional scheme with the airlines and the hoteliers. They are giving a proposal for the promotion scheme. So we are going to amalgamate and do a promotional scheme for tourism. So with that, we hope that the tourism industry will have a kickstart from middle of September.
In the meantime, State Minister of Vehicle Regulation, Bus Transport Services and Train Compartments Dilu Mamunagama announced today that interprovincial bus and travel services will be temporarily suspended from tomorrow until the 1st of August.
Marine protection authorities have decided to extend beach cleanup operations from the Express Pearl disaster for a further 6 months, 40 days after efforts commenced. Marine Environment Protection Authority Chairperson Darshini Lahandapura revealed that to date over 2,200 metric tons of debris has already been cleaned up, enough to fill 45 containers. Recent strong tides and winds have washed even more debris from the vessel's containers onto shorelines, resulting in the need for cleanup operations to be continued. The MV Express Pearl was carrying 1,486 containers of chemicals and cargo when it went up in flames on the 21st of May near the Colombo port, and a large number of containers had fallen into the sea during the blaze. So far, the release of toxic waste from the ship has to date resulted in the death of at least 20 dolphins, 4 whales and 176 turtles. Officials of the Mullatiu Quarantine Centre have decided to release 16 trade union activists who were placed in quarantine at the facility after engaging in a public protest last week. More than 30 protesters, including General Secretary of Ceylon Teachers Union Joseph Stalin, who were engaged in a protest at the Polduba roundabout in Battaramulla, were arrested on the 8th of July for unlawful assembly in violation of quarantine regulations. The demonstration had been organized by the Inter-University Students Federation, the Ceylon Teachers Union and the Frontline Socialist Party against the proposed General Sir John Kuthalawala National Defence University Bill. The arrestees were later released on bail after being produced before the Colombo Magistrates Court under the provisions of Quarantine and Prevention of Diseases Ordinance. Police have launched an investigation into the death of a 16-year-old domestic servant employed at the private residence of former Minister Rishad Badiuddin, who had suffered burn injuries on the 3rd of this month. The victim, who had been admitted to hospital after having reportedly attempted to set fire to herself, succumbed to her injuries yesterday while receiving treatment at the Colombo National Hospital. Police media spokesperson Senior DIG Ajit Rohana stated that 10 statements have been recorded in connection with the incident, while the Burala police are conducting further investigations.
A 15-year and 8 months old girl who was a domestic servant of ex-minister Richard Badurdin at his private residence at Bauddhalokamawatha Boralla, had been admitted to Colombo National Hospital with burn injuries on the 3rd of July 2021. Then thereafter, her death has been reported yesterday. Accordingly, Boralla Police has initiated investigation on the incident. Boralla Police has recorded 10 statements in respect of the witnesses, and the magisterial inquest in respect of the death has been conducted yesterday, and autopsy has also been conducted last night. The girl was a resident of Diagama area, and she has been brought to the residence of ex-minister as a domestic servant 9 months ago.
The Navy General Hospital in Valisara opened a new hemodialysis unit today that was inaugurated by Navy Commander Vice Admiral Nishantha Ulugethenna. The facility will treat all serving and retired naval personnel as well as their family members in need of dialysis treatment for kidney-related complications.
A new hemodialysis unit at the Navy General Hospital in Valisara was declared open by the Commander of the Navy Vice Admiral Nishantha Ulugethenna and the President Navy Seva Vanitha Unit Chandima Ulugethenna yesterday. The new facility for dialysis treatment was constructed with funds made available by the Directorate of the Naval Welfare and Essential Accessories provided by the Navy Seva Vanitha Unit. Established at the Navy General Hospital to expand healthcare facilities for the naval personnel, the dialysis unit would cater to the treatment of all serving and retired Navy personnel as well as their family members who are in need of dialysis treatment for kidney-related complications. The opening was held adhering to the COVID-19 protocols in force due to pandemic concerns, and the event was attended by Chief of Staff of the Navy, Rear Admiral Ruan Pereira, Commander Western Naval Area and Commander Volunteer Naval Force, Rear Admiral Upul de Silva, Director General Services, Rear Admiral Senaka Senaviratna, and Acting Director General Health Services, Commodore PJP Marambe.
Welcome back in your business news. Manufacturing activity in the month of June has seen an increase, according to the Central Bank's Purchasing Managers Index report, due to a strong recovery in new orders. However, respondents involved in the export sector cited continuous difficulties in reserving shipping space on top of a short supply of empty containers, while importers cited delays in making overseas payments and in opening letters of credit. The Central Bank's Purchasing Managers Index report shows that manufacturing activity has recovered marginally in June 2021, recording an index value of 50.4 in June 2021, with an increase of 8.3 index points from the previous month, driven by the strong recovery seen in new orders. Meanwhile, suppliers' delivery times continued to lengthen in June 2021, albeit at a slower pace, following the easing of travel restrictions. However, respondents in the survey mentioned experiencing delays in making overseas payments and in opening letters of credit for import purposes. Further, respondents involved in the export sector cited continuous difficulties in reserving shipping space on top of a short supply of empty containers. In the meantime, the services PMI also improved in June 2021 after 2 months of decline, recording an index value of 51.3, driven by the increase in expectations for activity supported by the relaxation of travel restrictions. The new businesses sub-index improved in June 2021 month-on-month. However, wholesale and retail trade, accommodation, food and beverage and other personal activities subsectors saw declines during the month. In addition, employment continued to fall, however at a slower pace in June due to retirements and resignations amid a halt in new recruitments in line with contracted business requirements. Meanwhile, expectations for business activities for the next 3 months picked up from May, with the positive sentiments reinforced by the relaxation of travel restrictions, while some respondents expressed their concerns with related to import restrictions. Sri Lankan shares snapped a 5-day winning streak to end lower today, weighed down by losses in financial stocks. The CSE All Share Price Index closed 0.24% lower at 7,966.95. However, the index posted its 7th weekly gain in 8, rising 1.46%. The S&P SL 20 index of more liquid stocks fell 0.3% or 1.05 points to close at 3,030.27. Meanwhile, the rupee once again remained unchanged at 202.89 against the US dollar today. Now let's have a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Thank you for joining. I'm Shanella Fernando. Have a good night.